Air Force One touched down in Beijing today, and the man stepping onto the red carpet did something almost nobody noticed at first. Donald Trump landed in the Chinese capital for the first time in nearly 9 years, the first American president to make this trip since 2017, and he arrived not as the dominant partner in this relationship, but as the one asking for help. He brought with him a delegation of corporate giants: Elon Musk of Tesla, Tim Cook of Apple, Jensen Huang of Nvidia, Larry Fink of BlackRock, the CEOs of Boeing, Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, MasterCard, Cargill, Blackstone, the biggest American business mission to China in a generation. The optics could not be more clear. America is coming to Beijing, and America is bringing its wallet. Now think about what that means. 4 months ago, another world leader made the very same trip. He landed in Beijing in January. He met with Xi Jinping at the Great Hall of the People. He signed a new strategic partnership covering energy, agriculture, climate cooperation, and a 50% export expansion goal by 2030. That leader was Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, and while Carney was quietly building a Pacific-facing relationship for Canada, Trump was on social media threatening to slap 100% tariffs on any country that dared to deal with China, including Canada. He even withdrew Canada's invitation to his so-called Board of Peace because Carney warned about economic coercion at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Most coverage is treating these two stories like unrelated chapters. They are not. Over the next few minutes, I am going to show you exactly how Carney got to Beijing first, how he came home with a deal, how Trump arrives now needing the same access, and what that quiet 4-month gap tells us about the new geometry of power between Washington, Ottawa, and the Pacific. Here is what actually happened. Donald Trump arrived in Beijing on the evening of May 13, 2026, for a 2-day summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping. The visit was scheduled to run through May 15th. The official framing from the White House described the trip as a state visit of, quote, tremendous symbolic significance. There would be a welcome ceremony, a bilateral meeting with President Xi at the Great Hall of the People, a visit to the Temple of Heaven, a formal state banquet, all the choreography of a successful American president engaging a major rival from a position of strength. That is the official framing. The operational reality tells a different story. This summit was supposed to happen in March. It was postponed because of the war that the United States and Israel launched against Iran on February 28th of this year. The Trump administration predicted that war would last 4 to 6 weeks. We are now in mid-May. The war is still going. The Strait of Hormuz is under a dual blockade. Global energy prices have spiked. Gas prices at the American pump have climbed sharply, and Donald Trump's approval ratings have fallen to record lows. So when Trump boarded Air Force One on Tuesday, May 12th, he was not flying to Beijing as the dominant superpower, bringing a reluctant partner to the table. He was flying as a president who needed a win. The agenda the White House has laid out is enormous: trade, Taiwan, artificial intelligence, the Iran war, rare earth exports, semiconductor restrictions, Boeing aircraft orders, soybeans, beef, the case of Jimmy Lai, the jailed Hong Kong publisher. Almost every contentious issue between the two countries packed into 48 hours. The kind of agenda that signals not strength, but urgency. And then there is the delegation. The list reads like a corporate hall of fame. Tesla and SpaceX chief executive Elon Musk, despite his very public falling out with the president last year. Apple chief executive Tim Cook, on what is reported to be his final major diplomatic mission before his retirement in September. Nvidia chief executive Jensen Huang, who joined the entourage at the last minute. BlackRock's Larry Fink, who manages roughly $11 trillion in assets. Goldman Sachs' David Solomon. Boeing's Kelly Ortberg, who is trying to salvage aircraft sales after Beijing raised tariffs on American goods to 125% in April of last year. Citigroup, MasterCard, Cargill, Blackstone, Micron, Qualcomm, GE Aerospace, the largest commercial delegation a sitting American president has brought to China in the modern era. Consider what that means in practice. When a president travels with that much corporate firepower, he is not negotiating peace, he is selling access. The unstated message to Xi Jinping is straightforward. Open your market, buy our planes, lift the rare earth restrictions, and in return, we will quietly soften the edges of our containment strategy. That is what is on the table, not a grand strategic reset, not a breakthrough, a transactional rescue mission for an American president who is bleeding political support at home. Even the experts the administration is briefing have lowered their expectations to the floor. The Council on Foreign Relations described the summit, before it even began, as an effort to stabilize the relationship Rather than resolve any of the long-standing disputes, Kyle Chan of the Brookings Institution put it bluntly, both sides want stability. Both sides want to reconfirm the relationship. Nobody is expecting deliverables. The Stimson Center's Dan Grazier added that Trump would, quote, at least try to enlist Xi to pressure Iran back to the negotiating table. Try. That is the word. The President of the United States is flying 12 hours to try. Now, hold all of that against what Canada just did, because the timing matters more than almost any American outlet has been willing to say. On January 13th of this year, exactly 4 months before Donald Trump's plane touched down in Beijing, another aircraft was already landing there. It carried Prime Minister Mark Carney. It was the first visit by a Canadian Prime Minister to China since 2017. The same gap that Trump is now closing, but Carney closed it first. He walked into the Great Hall of the People. He met with President Xi Jinping. He met with Premier Li Keqiang. He met with Zhao Leiji, chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress. He met them not as a supplicant, but as the leader of a G7 nation deliberately rebalancing its foreign policy. And he came home with something tangible. Carney and Xi released a joint statement outlining a new Canada-China strategic partnership. The pillars were specific. Energy cooperation with both countries described as energy superpowers, committing to expand two-way investment in batteries, solar, wind, and energy storage, clean technology and climate competitiveness, agri-food and wood products, a formal ambition to grow Canadian exports to China by 50% by 2030, cultural exchanges, visa-free access for Canadian travelers to China, a Destination Canada agreement with China Media Group ahead of the 2026 FIFA World Cup, which Canada is co-hosting, and Beijing's support for Canada's bid to host the 2029 APEC summit. There was more. The hard, measurable, immediate part. China agreed in principle to slash tariffs on Canadian canola seed from a combined rate of approximately 85% down to roughly 15%. That is a $4 billion market for Canadian farmers. Canola meal, lobsters, crabs, and Canadian peas were taken off the anti-discrimination tariff list. The combined effect, according to the Prime Minister's office, was to unlock nearly $3 billion in export orders for Canadian workers and businesses. $3 billion. Without firing a single trade war shot. That is not a tourism trip, that is a structural realignment. And it was the first time since the imprisonment of the so-called two Michaels, Canadian citizens detained in China in 2018, that Ottawa and Beijing had opened a new chapter at the leadership level. The Chinese state press called it the start of, quote, strategic autonomy for Canada. The English-language Global Times warned Ottawa not to slip back under Washington's will. Beijing's framing was explicit. They saw Carney's visit as Canada finally stepping out of America's shadow. And how did Washington respond? Within days of the deal, Donald Trump went on Truth Social. He posted, quote, if Governor Carney thinks he is going to make Canada a drop-off port for China to send goods and products into the United States, he is sorely mistaken. He threatened a 100% tariff on Canadian exports if Ottawa, quote, makes a deal with Beijing. He demoted Carney from Prime Minister to Governor in his own social media post. On the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Trump went further. Carney had given an address warning against economic no